Last night we had a spectacular night. At least I felt that way. I know we're a blessed people of God, in that we're a growing people of God, and I'm thankful for that. We're growing in new ways, and one way that I want to bring to light to you this morning real briefly is that I feel like we are growing in a spiritual way as well. And sometimes we highlight so many times how we're growing numerically by adding people to the church, by being baptized. These people are committing themselves to Christ, and the Lord is adding them to our number. And then there's people that have placed membership, that are a part of our body here in this local setting, a part of God's people, and that's growth as well. But one way that I think is so amazing that we need to grow in, that we need to continue in, and a way that I can see that we're growing is that we're growing in a spiritual way. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful because when you are growing in a spiritual way, it leads to growth a numerical way. And so I know that that's happening because the numbers prove it. Does that make sense? It's really just a circle of what we're finding here at North Heights. We are a unique people. Bill Whittington mentioned that last night, that this is a unique church. And this is a good church, a wonderful growing church, and I'm thankful to be a part of it. Thankful to be here, and I hope that you are as well. Last night, we got together with people that placed membership and became a part of us in about the last year or so. And about 20 plus families have committed themselves to be a part of our church family just in the last year. I don't know if you know this or not, but between 2020 and 2022, okay, that little period right there, we added 37 families. 37 families. And then 20 families just in the last year. I've been talking to some of our people right here that have been here for years. And sometimes they look around and they say, you know what? I don't know those people. And that happens all the time. There's a lot of times that we come in here and there's like always a visitor. There's always a visitor. And that's because we're a growing church, both numerically and spiritually. We are the people of God. This year, we have focused in on God. The lessons have focused in on God. The God who was and who is and is to come. But this lesson really focuses in on God's people. I want us to pause for just a moment and not necessarily take our focus off of God, but really just bring attention to who we are as God's people, and talk about a few things from the Scriptures that describe us, that help us to see and identify who we are. It's important for us to identify the people of God. You've probably heard this illustration before. I probably have used it here. But there was this one time that this crowd of people were gathered together in this arbitrary hypothetical situation, right? And this great fence was built between or in the midst of these people. And people were asked that if you are with God, to stand on this side of the fence, but if you are with Satan, stand on this side of the fence. And before too long, people began to divide themselves and say, I'm with Satan and I'm with God. And there's this one fella who decided that he was going to just sit on the fence. Literally, that may be where we got that phrase, sit on the fence. Because he hadn't really quite decided about who he was going to belong to, who he was as a person. Before too long, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, comes to him and says to him, hey, come on, you're with me. And he says, no, I've not made this decision to be with you or to be with God. And Satan, the great serpent of old, says, yeah, but I own the fence. And so when you make that decision of not making a decision, you're basically making the decision to be with Satan. It's important for us to define who the people of God are. And that's what I hope to accomplish this morning. I hope that by the end of this sermon, that you not only know about who the people of God are, that's the questions that we're going to ask, who are the people? I want us to also discover, and we're going to ask this question, what should the people of God be doing? And then, how should the people of God see themselves? How do we look at understand who we are. And by the end of it, I hope that we can answer those questions and get a greater grasp on who we are as the people of God. We're going to do this in a couple of ways. First of all, we're going to look at several passages that talk about who the people of God are. And then we're going to go to one text to answer the last two questions that I think perfectly answer it for us. So let's begin and talk about who are the people of God. Well, here's what happens in Genesis. In Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, God tells and has this conversation with Abraham. And it says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you." First of all, that's pretty amazing to think about just for a moment. Leave everything that you've ever known and go to a place that I will show you. And if you're like me, I like to know where I'm heading. But Abram's just told, just go and I'll show you where you're going. And so he says, "And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." There's two things that I think are important for us to understand and point out in this passage. First of all, God says, "I will make you a great nation." But it's not just Abraham's family that's going to be blessed, but it's all of Abraham's family and relatives and friends that are going to be blessed. But not just that, the scope gets even broader. And he says, all the families of the earth will be blessed because of this one great nation. Earlier, David Chronister read this passage to us from Isaiah 51 and verse 16. This chapter, and really verse 13, God is telling Isaiah, and Isaiah is telling the people of God, and now telling us, they've forgotten who God is. They've forgotten who He is and who they are. And now in verse 16, he says, "I have put my words in your mouth and have covered you with the shadow of my hand to establish the heavens, to found the earth, and to say to Zion, you are my people." You are my people. Don't forget it. I like to tell my kids when I'm dropping them off at school every so often, I'll say, hey, don't forget to make good decisions. Make good decisions today. Think about what you've got to do. Think about what job you have today, and make good decisions. And when you go about in your life, when you go about in this day, think about how you can make these good decisions. And remember who you are. Who you are. You represent us. I get a little preachy on the way to school. You represent us as a family, and you represent God. As the North Heights Church of Christ, you're a part of this, and you represent the church. And not only that, but you need to remember whose you are, who you belong to. Who you belong to. We need to be reminded that we are the people of God. We are the people of God. And with that come great responsibilities. And it's not it's an exclusive group, but it's not an exclusive group. Here's what Paul says. This is a passage you're very, very familiar with in Romans chapter 1 and verse 16. Paul says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation, to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek." And that should make us remember what was told to Abram, that God would make him a great nation, and that all the families of the earth would be blessed. You see, the gospel of salvation, it is to everyone. And so it's not an exclusive group. It's for anybody. Anybody on the condition that they believe. They believe. And it's not just to the Jew first, to the Israelites. It's not just to God's chosen people. Not just the people who call Abraham their father. It's to everyone. To the Jew first, and then also to the Greek. And I don't know about you, but I'm thankful for that. My heritage is not Jewish. And I'm thankful. I'm considered a Greek. I'm considered a Gentile outside of the direct lineage of Abraham. And for salvation to be available to me, man, I'm thankful that I too can be a part of the great nation where all the families of the earth will be blessed. I'm thankful, and I hope you are as well, that you can be a part of the people of God. In Galatians chapter 3, verses 28 through 29, Paul writes and says this, "Neither is there Jew nor Greek, neither is there slave nor free man, neither is there male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, then you are," listen to this, "Abraham's descendants, heirs according to promise." What promise? The promise that we read about back in Genesis chapter 12. You are a part of Abraham's descendants. Why? Because, notice this, you belong to Christ. And so these things that divide us, these things that we label people as, whether they're Jew or Greek or slave or free, male or female, all these distinctions that we make in our lives every single day, every time you look at yourself in the mirror, you know exactly who you are. You know you're a man. You know you're a woman. You know these things. No doubt in your mind about who you are. And when you belong to Christ, and you know you belong to Christ, you are also a part of Abraham's descendants. You are the great nation. You are the people of God. Who are the people of God? The people of God are a great people who belong to God. That sounds very redundant. Point all that out for us and just make it super clear. The people of God belong to Him. And there's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. You want to be a part of the great nation that was promised long ago? You need to belong to God. Belong to Him. Have him be able to have you in His possession as His people. Let's ask this next question. What should the people of God be doing? Now, go with me to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll camp out here for the remainder of the sermon. Okay? Colossians chapter 3. In chapter 2, verse 20, Paul writes and sets up this condition for people. He sets up this condition. He says, if you've died with Christ. And so we understand, we should anyway, the greater scope of this. People that have died with Christ are Christians. People who have died to Christ have died with Christ, have died to their sins, and they've put on Christ. And therefore, he says, verse 1 of chapter 3, therefore you have been raised up with Christ. If you've died with Christ and you've put Him on in baptism, if you're a Christian, then you have been raised up with Christ. And he says, keep seeking the things that are above. So let's ask that question. What should the people of God be doing? Well, here's what he says, verses 1 through 4. Let's read it together. Therefore, if any of you have been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with Him in glory. So as the people of God, as people who have committed themselves to God, why? Because you've died with Christ. You've been buried with Him in baptism. You belong to Him. You are the people of God. And as the people of God, He tells us in these first few verses right here of chapter 3, that if we're going to be this way, and if we've been raised up with Christ, then we need to keep seeking the things that are above and set our mind on things that are above. It's a mindset. So not only do you need to be seeing what is spiritual, seeing what is godly, and rejecting evil and wickedness, but you also need to be changing in your mind the things that are spiritual. Be thinking and seeing things that are spiritual more so than anything else. Why do we do this? Because our life is hidden with Christ, and we are in God. We belong to Him. And if we belong to Him, then we're seeking things that are above. We're considering those things that are above all the time. That's what the people of God should be doing. Why are you here this morning? Why are you here? Do you like getting up early? Some people do, I guess, right? Do you like getting up early? Do you like getting all dressed up? Do you enjoy that? Maybe you do. But why are you here this morning? What What is this thought process of why you're here? Do you want to be here because you belong to God? I hope so. I hope you're here because you want to benefit from the spiritual blessings that are found in God. You're not here for your own health. You're not here for anything else. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we have the things that we have? Why do we do these events? Because we are spiritually minded people. We want to reach people. We want to make a difference. We want to make a difference in your life. And so the whole thought process of the people of God needs to be, how does this benefit me spiritually in the long run? How does this benefit somebody else that I love spiritually in the long run? How can I be seeking the things that are above? How can I be working and serving in the people of God, in the Lord's church, so that we can enjoy the blessings that are to come? Be thinking that all the time. What should the people of God be doing? They need to be seeking things that are above and setting their mind on the things that are above. It needs to be in your heart and in your mind. Now keep reading with me. He goes on to say, verses 5 through 9. He says, therefore consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. For it is because of these things that the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience. And in them you also once walked when you were living in them. But now you also put them aside. Anger and wrath and malice, slander, abusive speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self with its evil practices. What should the people of God be doing? Rejecting sin. That's what we need to be doing. Rejecting sin. Reject sin in our life and reject the presence of sin in the lives around you. That's what we need to be doing. He says it this way, consider your members of your earthly body as dead. The things that are fleshly, the things that are material, the things that really don't matter, that are not going to last, that are corruptible. Those things need to just be rubbish. They need to be dead to you. You're not even worried about those kinds of things. You've got a bigger picture in mind. You're thinking about the things that are good and that are spiritual, right? Because he said already to be seeking the things that are above, setting your mind on things that are above. And so anything else that's not that needs to be rejected in your life. And he lists out some of those things. Immorality and impurity and passion, evil desire and greed. And he says, which amounts to idolatry. It's basically idolatry. He says, for in it, these things, the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience. If you disobey God, you're going to have to face the consequences of it. The wrath of God. And in them you once walked. That's where you were. You were here. You once lived and walked in those things that were worldly, fleshly things, earthly things. That's where you were. When you were living in them. See, when the Bible talks about walking in things and living in, it's the same thing. Living and walking in those things. It's a way of life. You did these things. When Paul writes to the Colossians, he says, this is what you were guilty of. And when he says this to you today, these are the things that you are guilty of in your past life. These are things you've done. He says, but now, I'm so thankful for that but now. But now, you've put them aside. You've rejected them. We talk about all the time when we talk to people about obeying the gospel that they need to die to sin. Die to sin. Not die from sin. Sometimes people die from sin. Sin is in their life and it causes them to lose their life even. We're not talking about dying from sin. I'm talking about dying to sin. In other words, you are willing to reject it. Put it aside, away from you. And he says, lists them out right here. Anger needs to be one of them. Wrath needs to be one of them. Those go hand in hand a lot of times. Sometimes anger leads to wrath, doesn't it? It's not wrong to be angry. It's wrong to act on that anger in wrath. Anger and wrath and malice, slander and abusive speech. Even the things that you say from your mouth. He says these are the things that you need to put aside. And he says, since you laid aside that old self with all of its evil practices. That's your old self. That's who you once were. But now, as the people of God, you've rejected them. What should the people of God be doing? Well, they need to be thinking and seeking the things that are above, and they need to be rejecting sin. They need to be rejecting sin. Now let's keep going. Oh, yeah, here, that's the point right there I guess I'm making, right? The people of God need to act like it. Let's act like it. If we say this is the way we need to be, then let's do it. You don't get to just say the words, you have to do the words. So act like it. All right, let's ask this question. How should the people of God see themselves? This is about self-awareness. This is about self-perception. How should you see yourself? Well, he tells us in this text. Let's keep reading. Colossians 3, verse 10 through 11. Paul writes and says, and have put on the new self. This is a continuation from verse 9. Have put on the new self, who is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. A renewal in which there is no distinction between Greek and Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free man, but Christ is all and in all. This goes right back to what we were saying earlier. As the people of God, anyone and everyone can be a part of it. But there's some conditions that need to be met. Conditions that need to be met. We need to be able to reject sin. We need to be seeking things that are above. And we need to be renewed to a true knowledge. We need to be a new self, a new creature. A new person, as 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 17 tells us. That we've put off the old self and we are now a new creature in God. That's who you are. And he says this, according to the image of the one who created him. How should the people of God view themselves? How should you see yourself? You should look at yourself in view of the image of God. Which means that you don't compare yourself to other people of God. You don't compare yourself to other people of God. You can't sit there and say, well, boy, if I could just only be like this person over here. If I could be like brother so-and-so. If I could be like this person or that person. I would be so blessed. Listen, you can have mentors. You can have goals to be set. But truly, the person that you want to be in the image of is the person that created you. You want to be able to look at yourself spiritually in the mirror and say, I want to be like God. I want to be like God. Which means you have to act like that. You remember the song from Jungle Book, I want to be like you, hoo. I want to walk like you, talk like you, hoo. You know it's true, hoo, right? It's true. You want to look and act and talk and walk like Jesus. Not like anybody else in this room. Not like anybody else. Sure, they set great examples for you, but you are created in Him, and according to His image is who you need to be. That's what you need to be, how you need to be viewing yourself. Be like Him. There's no distinction. It doesn't matter, male, female, Jew, Greek, barbarian, Scythian, uncircumcised, circumcised. It doesn't make any difference. You're all in Christ. You belong to Christ. And as the people of God, you are created in the image of the one who created you. You're like God. Matter of fact, God says that, doesn't He? When He creates man, He creates him. He says, let us make man in what? Our image. God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit team up together to create mankind in their image. We need to be like Him. He's created us that way. Let's be like Him. And that means that I've got to walk and I've got to talk according to God's standard. Not anybody else's. But I'm going to look to God and see how I can be more like Him. How should the people of God view themselves? You need to be viewing yourself in God's image. But keep reading with me, verse 12 through 13. He says, so as those who have been chosen of God, you're created by God, and you're created in His image. Now you are chosen of God. And He says, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. So who are we? How should we view ourselves? We need to view ourselves as the chosen of God. The chosen of God. Here's the beauty of this. When you are the chosen of God, it means you belong to Him. You are in the church. You are in the church. And God has chosen His people to save. He's always chosen His people to save. He's not going to save anybody else that's not His people. And so if you want to be in the chosen of God, you have to choose to be in the chosen. Does that make sense? You have to choose to be in the chosen. Because you have the choice. God has given you free will. You can either be on this side of the fence or this side of the fence or on the fence. And when you make that choice of where you're going to stand, you've made the choice to be in the chosen that God is going to save or not. And so with that, if you're the chosen of God, then what comes with that is that you are holy. A holy nation, as the Apostle Peter says. A royal priesthood. We're a unique people. A holy and beloved. We're beloved. Not only do we enjoy the love of God, but we enjoy the love of each other. And he says, put on this heart of compassion. As the people of God, compassion needs to come with that. We need to be viewing ourselves as people who are kind, who are humble and gentle, and who are patient, who are bearing, enduring with one another. We're able to endure through those difficult things that we have to deal with as the people of God. And we also forgive each other. We don't hold anything against each other. We're forgiving to each other. And that's what he says. Each other. Whoever has a complaint, he goes on to say, that's the way Paul writes anyway. He goes on and elaborates further about this idea of forgiving. And he says, if you've got a complaint against anyone, he doesn't say go air out your grievances. He doesn't say go and talk to somebody about it. What does he say? Forgive them. Forgive them in the same way that Jesus forgave you. That's the way you behave. You just forgive them. They don't even have to know about it. That's the way it is with God, right? When Jesus died on the cross, you didn't even know that you wasn't even in existence. And He died on the cross to forgive you. He was already in the process of forgiving you. And you didn't even know anything about it. So when somebody has a complaint against you, keep your mouth shut. When you want to complain about anything, don't complain. Just forgive. Why? Because Jesus forgave you, is what Paul says. Jesus forgave you. That's the people of God. You are the chosen people of God. You're created and you're chosen. But that's not the only one. Paul goes on to say this in Colossians chapter 3, verse 14 through 15. Beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. How should the people of God view themselves? Well, they need to view themselves as the created image of God. They need to view themselves as the chosen people of God. And lastly, according to this text, we need to view ourselves as the called in one body people of God. And with this comes, when we're called into love. And he says that this love is the perfect bond of unity. Perfect bond of unity. It's the perfect glue. You want to stick together, you love each other. He's already talked about forgiving each other. And so as the people of God, we need to view ourselves as the created image, the chosen, but more than anything, the called into love, called into unity, where we can find the body of Christ melting and merging together as one unified unit of people, the people of God. You are called into one body. One body. And that's the body, the people of God. It's the perfect love, is that perfect bond of unity that pulls us all into to be the people of God. Called into it, into that perfect bond of unity. That's who we are. So what do? The people of God are created. You need to view yourself as the created, the chosen, and the called. That's who we are. That's who we are. That's how you need to view yourself. What a great blessing it is. Here's the thing. I want you to think about it. Don't you want to be a part of that people of God? Listen, it's been promised all the way back there to Abram in Genesis that these people would be the chosen people of God. Abraham's descendants, a great nation. And it is proven that God is going to save His people. Oh, you need to make the choice to be in the people of God. It's the most blessed people. The great. And if you're not a part of the people of God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's going to be horrible for you. It's going to be horrible for you. And I don't want that for you. And you don't want that for yourself. What you need to do is choose to be in the people of God. And you do this by what he said earlier in Colossians chapter 3. If you've died with Christ, you've rejected sin, and you've died with Christ, killing off the sin in your life. If you have been raised up with Christ, then you're a part of the people of God. And the way that you do that is you're baptized into Jesus Christ. You're dying to yourself. You're going to be buried with Him in baptism. And you're raised up to walk a new life. And then you are included in the people of God. This morning we've investigated. We've asked these questions. Who are the people of God? What should the people of God be doing? And how should the people of God view themselves? Now, the ball's in your court. Do you want to be a part of the people of God, North Heights? I hope you do. Make that decision this morning as together we stand and as we sing.